And it was only after the Tamils protested that this was not the only ethnic group, and the Muslims protested, that they produced two stripes, fairly insignificant stripes, to represent the Tamils and the Muslims. This exemplifies Sinhala thinking of the land race threatening or taking a dominant position over the rest of the population. Let us move from fiction to facts. Facts are essentially unknown. There is no mystery about where the Tamils came from. They came from South India. Where the Sinhalese are concerned, there is considerable doubt. The evidence is that they are a polyglot people who came from various parts of India and even from further afield, such as Indonesia. Does it matter? Of course it doesn't. I mean, it was something that happened 2,500 years ago. But to those with an agenda, it does matter, which is the Sinhalese. In addition to what I've just told you, this absurd story of the Mahamamsa, they claim that they arrived in Sri Lanka before the Tamils. There is not a shred of evidence to support that. In fact, there is a lot of evidence to the contrary, because the country is only, as I told you, 20 miles away, 36 kilometers away from the South Indian coast. It's most unlikely that the Sinhalese, who claim to have come from here, got there before the Tamils. Anyway, we'll leave that aside. The second baggage that the Sinhalese carry is that, as I told you, Buddha gave them the country. More important than argue about where these people came from is to discuss what happened after they arrived. After a series of wars between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, and from invading tribes from South India, the two ethnic groups, very sensibly in my opinion, decided that to divide and exist was better than to fight and destroy each other. The Tamils established a separate kingdom, a Tamil kingdom in the north, functioned between 13th and 17th century. There are very good evidence for that. The Sinhalese decided to set up two kingdoms, the Kandyan kingdom in the center, Kandyan Sinhalese, and the Kotte kingdom, the low country Sinhalese, the area that I come from. So, Sri Lanka, or Lanka as it then was, consisted of three separate kingdoms. Then came the Westerners. 1505, the Portuguese, who were interested in mainly the spice and Roman Catholicism. Sri Lanka had the largest supply of wild cinnamon in the world. They were followed in 1640 by the Dutch, who became more involved in Calvinism, altering the legal system, schools, canals, etc. Then came the British in 1796, and in 1801, Lanka, Ceylon, as it was then called, was declared a crown colony under the British. They quit in 1948. During these 150 years, the British instituted major changes. There were changes in administration, with the abolishing of the separate kingdoms and the centralization of power in Colombo. We will go into this very important administrative change presently. The economy was changed to a plantation economy based on tea to fill the British cup. The language of government, which was essentially Sinhalese and Tamil, the language of the people, was changed to English, which replaced Sinhala and Tamil. And in the religions, Buddhism and Hinduism, the religions of the people, was replaced by Christianity, which was given pride of place. The British quit Sri Lanka in 1948, leaving the country in Sinhalese hands. Here are the changes effected by the British. In 1833, the Colebrook Cameron reforms, as they are called, they unified that which was divided and divided for a very good reason. And worse still, they centralized power in Colombo. Here are the results. I would like to spend some time with this very important slide. There was a centralization of power, and not only a development of the area around the southwest, around Colombo, but an overdevelopment. Not only was there an overdevelopment of the southwest, but a developmental neglect of the entire periphery, the north, the east area where the Tamils lived, and even the deep Sinhala south. It is interesting and important to appreciate that the two major uprisings, anti-government uprisings that have occurred, the Sinhala youths, Marxist youths in this area, the Sinhala South, and the Tamil militants from the north and the east came from this developmentally neglected area. The Tamil youths had a second reason for their uprising, and that was discrimination against the Tamils, which we will go into. Two interesting points, important points, that because of the developmental overdevelopment and selective development of the southwest, the Tamils had, or some of the Tamils, had to migrate from the north into this area for employment and for education, for tertiary education. For many years, the only university in Lanka was in Colombo. Here they competed successfully, and some would say too successfully, with the Sinhalese for scarce jobs in a shrinking jobs market. The result was that when the British quit Sri Lanka, more Tamils on a percentage basis held white-collar and professional jobs and jobs in government departments than their percentage in the country. There's another interesting point. I told you that there was an uprising of the Sinhala militant Marxist youths in this area in 1971 and again in 1988, which challenged the Bandaranaike government in Colombo and brought it to its knees. The Tamil youths uprising there challenged the authority of the Sinhala state. This is called an insurgency, while that is called terrorism. The play with words is interesting, to say the least. The British did one more thing. They introduced the Indian plantation Tamils. This was slave labor on the tea plantations. They bought 1 million South Indian Tamils from British South India and relocated them in the hill country of Ceylon to work on the coffee plantations and later the tea plantations. These South Indian estate labor was brought post 1830. They were paid a pittance and made to live in slums and prevented from integrating with the people in the country. We are now in a position to look at the ethno-religious mix of the country, 20 million people. There are Sinhalese, 74% of the country. The Tamils of two groups, the Sri Lankan Tamils, who like the Sinhalese have been in the country for 2,500 years, 12.5%. The plantation Tamils, the ones that I have just referred to, 5.5% of the country. And the Muslims are descendants of Arab traders from the 13th to the 15th century. They speak a different language. The Sinhalese speak Sinhalese, the Tamils of both groups speak Tamil, and the Muslims are mainly Tamil speaking, although many speak both languages. In addition to an ethnic and a linguistic difference, there is a religious difference in that the Sinhalese are mainly Buddhists, 70% of the country, the Tamils of both groups Hindu, 15%. Christians are converts from Buddhism and Hinduism, 7% of the country. And the Muslims, of course, follow Islam. The British left in 1948, as I said, leaving the country in the hands of the Sinhala majority. The Sinhalese will always be in the majority because they form 70% of the country. There were no safeguards for the Tamils. The Tamils, looking at their history and concerns about anti-Tamil racist comments being made by the Sinhala politicians even before the British left, expressed concerns that under a Sinhala regime there will be discrimination against the Tamils. And they asked for a federal Tamil state, or at least guaranteed minority representation for the Tamils. The British, in their wisdom, thought that this was not necessary. They claimed that constitutional safeguards were sufficient for the protection of the minorities, and we will see how safe these safeguards are. The first act of the newly independent country was to disenfranchise and de-citizenize 1 million plantation Tamils in one of the worst acts of political vandalism the world has ever known. Sinhalese and the Tamils up to that point, that's independence, were united, and there was a possibility of a united Sri Lanka. With this act of political barbarism, the Tamil polity split into what I call the Tamil hopefuls, whose thought